Golden State Media Concepts social media podcast. Time to hashtag everything. We talk about all the fun, crazy stories on social media. From Instagram to Facebook, Twitter to Tumblr, or probably even Friendster. Join us each week as we explore the quirky side of social media. It's the Golden State Media Concepts social media podcast.
It's simple, such a sad song. The one that we rely on to get us.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Social Media News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Shamaria Jackson. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the pandemic fallout that is severely threatening U.S. dairy farms. And also, we're going to talk about the COVID-19 seeming to get closer and closer to President Donald Trump. And finally, we're going to be talking about legends that has recently passed away. And all of that and more is coming up in today's social media news. It seems as if a lot of things has already affected us because of this pandemic. In my last podcast, I was talking about how farmers were being affected because of this pandemic. You know, many of them had to throw out food because they weren't getting used, and those were those good perishable foods. So because schools were closed, because cafeterias were closed, and also because restaurants were closed, and many times the stores could only accept so much, many times these farmers had no other choice but to throw out their food. So now what we're seeing because of this pandemic is that, all farmers are being affected. But specifically, the dairy farms, however, are being even more affected. So many farmers are forced to dump the milk supply, which is in turn taking money away from these farmers. They're putting it back into the soil so that the cows can come by, eat the food, because, they have to dump the food into the grass, which creates food for the cows. Cows come back, eat the food, produces milk, stuff like that. But it's still a waste of money. So many of these farmers, they are giving it to to soup kitchens, homeless shelters and stuff. But again, just like I said in one of my other podcasts, there's only so much that one person can do. So after years of low prices and trade disputes, 2020 was finally supposed to be a better one for the U.S. dairy farmers. But now it could be what drives many of them out of business for good. Many hope some government relief will keep them afloat as they dump countless gallons of milk they would have sold to restaurants and schools now shuttered by the coronavirus. The last several weeks have proven an unexpectedly challenging time for the entire agriculture sector as the country's food service supply chain struggles to adjust to life in an unforeseen and an unprecedented situation. But dairy farmers have to figure out what to do with their extremely perishable products when about 50% of the industry's demand from restaurants, schools, and cafeteria and other services is cut off. And two major markets for many of the dairy product farmers rely on have largely dried up. These two major markets are restaurants and schools. Okay. They're schools because kids are coming in there. They know for a fact that for a certain amount of time, these schools are going to be in session, and these people need to have milk. Okay. And that's the same thing that goes for restaurants. People are always eating at restaurants. And I know for many people, or at least for me at least, I've noticed that eggs, milk, cheese, butter, all of their prices are down at the moment. So if you need these products, it would be best for you to get them now, especially because their prices are so low. And while, wholesale milk prices are down, those are signs that some dairy sales have actually risen during the quarantine as consumers are buying more ice cream, butter, and cheese. Okay, so now, that everyone has already had their little scare and, they've cut down on buying the milk, the cheese, the butter, the ice cream, possibly because they've noticed that you can't keep these items for a long period of time. Now you have to go back and you have to get something. So for instance, when this whole pandemic was going on, it's still ongoing, but when it was fresh and people were, I guess, more scared, overwhelmed, anxious about everything going on, a lot of them rushed to the stores and they were taking, strangely, toilet paper and ice cream. No, toilet paper, milk, and ice cream. Trust me, I know it was ice cream because I went there looking for ice cream and the ice cream was gone. But during my time at the store, I ran into a lady who had 4 big gallons of milk. 4 big gallons of milk. And we were in the line just talking before 6 foot away before social distancing was a thing. So she randomly started talking to me, and I really didn't, like I said this in my past podcasts, I really don't like talking to people at the store, but I was like, okay, sure, I'll talk to you. So she looked in my basket and she was like, you need to go and grab milk. And I said, well, you do realize that the milk expires after a certain amount of time. Then I'm lactose intolerant. So I was like, I'm not about to die. I'm good off that. I'll just go get something else. But she was telling me that pretty soon things are going to change. So she said, what you always need in your refrigerator is bread, milk, eggs, and cheese. That's what she always said, and beans and rice. But those were the most things that she ever told me that I needed to get. And when I asked her, why did you get 4 gallons? She was like, to keep me through this pandemic. And I said, well, you do realize that milk is only good for a certain amount of time before it spoils. And then she sat there and she looked at me and she said, the milk is going to be gone. And I was like, well, that defeats the purpose. So now you're going to have to come back to the store. You're going to have to dump out the milk that spoils. So you're wasting your money on milk that just rose up in price, that has just risen in price. You're wasting your money. And then you're going to have to come back to the store, possibly buy 4 more gallons of milk just to have the other 2 spoil, just so you can stay in the home. I'm not understanding. So she stopped talking to me after that, I guess because I made a very logical point, but it's very logical for the farmers to do that at the same time, because that's my case in point right there. People aren't really thinking when they see a pandemic on the screen, when they see different events going on the screen or something that may affect them. They were too busy focused on hurrying up and grabbing the product so no one else can get it. So it was a little bit of selfishness, and it was a little bit of panic. So I understood why this lady grabbed 4 gallons of milk. I understand, but at the same time, I don't think she was thinking logically. And by me logically telling her that her wasting her money at this time would be a bad idea, she did it anyway. Now, I don't know what happened to her. I haven't seen her since then. That was back in March. So hopefully she's doing okay with her 4 gallons of milk, 3 gallons, 2 gallons. I don't know. She probably went to get some more, but I can understand why they rose in price, again, because of panic and because of selfishness. They know people are going to be selfish with the milk, because look at what they did with the toilet paper. So they're going to come in, rush in, grab what they need, what they think they need and what they want, and rush out, no matter if it's going to spoil or not. It's kind of that mindset of, I would rather the milk spoil with me than spoil with you. That way I'm protected and you're not. It's kind of like a selfish tactic, but that's strange that many people do it. And I've noticed that since the pandemic, when not a lot of people were in the stores because of social distancing, because the advertising of staying at home, because businesses were closed, many people did not want to leave their stores. And so what I did when I had to go to the grocery store was I would look at the prices of some of these products, and I would notice that the price went down significantly. Why? Because these dairy farmers still need to make a profit. And because they need to make this profit, they're willing to lower the price because they know not a lot of consumers are coming into the store to buy it. So instead of it being a wide number of people coming in to buy this cheaper, the milk at a cheaper price, they'd rather bump up the price when a lot of people they know for a fact are going into the store. I hope that makes sense. For everyone, we don't know how long this pandemic is going to last. We don't know how long people are going to have restaurants that have social gathering. We don't know how long they're going to be closed. We don't know how long it's going to take for schools to open officially back up, for, people to come into schools. And even for, different restaurants, different buildings, hotels, we don't know how long this whole event is going to last. So, just finding out with these farmers and basically what's going to happen in the future is really scary, because this is these farmers' lives at hand. I mean, for some farmers, this is all that they know. They've grown up on the farm. They've worked on the farm their whole lives. And a pandemic like this comes and they don't know what to do. This is their product and this is their money being affected. And for many of them, this is a family legacy that is also being messed with, because for many of these farmers, this, like I just said, is all that they know. And because they've grown up on the farm, their granddaddy, their great-granddaddy, their great-great-great-granddaddy, this farm is something that means something to them. And this may jeopardize not only their family, their product, as well as their money. So it's just going to be interesting to see how our lives are going to be affected going further into 2020. Coming up after the break, the COVID-19 is not letting up, and it looks like it's coming in closer toward President Donald Trump as well as his family members. All of that coming up right after this break.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast, dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Welcome back. Before that break, we were talking about the pandemic fallout that is severely threatening the United States dairy farms and how foods such as milk, butter, cheese, ice cream, how all of those are being affected because many of them are having to dump out the supplies that they have gathered at their farms. Why? Because schools are closed, restaurants are closed, hotels, other things that, these farmers can go and drop off that gives them their farms of demand are now closed. So they have no other choice but to dump out their product. And that is beginning to affect their money and may affect their business. In this segment, I wanted to talk about how the COVID-19 is seeming to get closer and closer to President Donald Trump. It seems like earlier last week we were talking about Ivanka Trump's assistant testing positive for coronavirus, and that's amongst the other White House staff. Also, we had Vice President Pence's press secretary, Katie Miller, testing positive last week as well. And because of this also brought in a lot of whistleblowers and just, a lot of mess that happened. President Trump's personal valet has tested positive for coronavirus. And even though Trump has tested negative, doctors say that doesn't mean he's virus free. And if he does have the coronavirus, it could have been exposed to many others. According to the White House, both Trump and Vice President Mike Pence has tested negative for the virus and they remain in good health. Several doctors, including an ER physician who treats COVID-19 patients in the ICU unit of major LA hospitals, say someone exposed to the virus one day may test negative the next day, even if they have the virus. The ER doctor says his unit will admit people suspected of having coronavirus, and even if they test negative, they will retest them 7 days later. The reason because of this is that the virus needs time to absorb into the body before a test will reveal if the person is positive or actually negative. However, the person can transmit the virus to others if they haven't tested positive yet. This is all so like very, very weird, and it's also very like different, I guess you can say. Especially because something like this works the way it does. It's just so weird to see these people who are connected and the coronavirus getting so close to President Trump. And if you guys don't know, Trump went to Arizona last Tuesday and he did not wear a mask. Okay, he did not wear the mask, and I believe it was at a World War II veterans service. He did not wear his mask. The people had to be like, hey, President Trump, like, put your mask on. He put his mask on. He was like, oh, yeah, put his mask on. And the thing is, if someone had the virus, they could have infected him, or if he had the virus, he could have infected them. I think in his defense, I do the same things. Like sometimes you're so used to not wearing a mask, and you're just so used to just going on about your business that sometimes it slips your mind to put on a face mask. And so in his defense, I think he was just like, oh yeah, I forgot about this face mask. Okay, so it's a brain hiccup, okay? So in his defense, I think he just had a brain hiccup. It's the wrong possible time to have a brain hiccup, but he had a brain hiccup. Now, moving on to the doctors who treats the COVID-19 patients in the ICU. It's so weird to see that, you could test positive one day and then 7 days later, all of a sudden you have COVID-19. So now you're like, oh my gosh, do I really? So that brings up a bunch of questions now that I have. So let's say could you test positive one day and then the next day not, or 7 days later not have COVID-19? Or does it only work the reverse way to where you don't have it? You test negative for having COVID-19. 7 days later, you don't have COVID-19. And then let's say another 7 or 14 days, now all of a sudden you have COVID-19. Could it work like that? It's a huge question because you just don't know. And it's just so weird that Ivanka Trump's assistant has it. Okay, so could Ivanka Trump have the COVID-19? Because she was technically more exposed to her personal assistant than Trump was to his valet. Okay, partially because the valet only takes the keys, drives the car to the parking spot, or takes the car. It doesn't really have that much interaction with President Trump. But Ivanka Trump, she has the most connection to her personal assistant. And so that goes the same thing with Vice President Mike Pence. Could he have it because his press secretary, has it? So how is this going to work out? Who is the main carrier? That's something that no one, I guess, will ever know, because again, you never know if they may have it or may not have it, simply because they could, like the doctor said, test negative one day, and then the next day they test positive. So it's just weird. Also, I mean, I understand that you can't really social distance in that particular career field. It's just a major question going on here. I also have a lot of conspiracy theories going on in the back of my head, but I'm going to leave them alone because I feel like on my last podcast, I sounded a little crazy when I said my conspiracy theory, so I'm going to leave it alone. I'm actually going to leave this segment alone as well, and we're going to switch gears, and we're going to focus on music. I wanted to switch gears and talk about music, talk about something that's going to uplift us. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some Instagram battles that graced us this past weekend between Erykah Badu and Jill Scott. All of that coming up after this break. Stay tuned.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hey everybody, welcome back. So before that break, we were talking about the connections that are kind of leading up to President Donald Trump possibly catching the COVID-19. Why? Because his valet, who is kind of connected to him, but not really connected to him, catching and testing positive to the COVID-19. And also how Mike Pence's the vice president, who is deeply connected to Donald Trump's press secretary, Katie Miller, catching the COVID-19. And finally, Ivanka Trump, who is President Trump's daughter, her personal assistant, catching the COVID-19. So all of those people who are deeply connected to President Trump, they have caught it. Now, I know some of you are like, they're not even connected to him. But they are. Okay, so Mike Pence, his press secretary, caught it, which could lead up to Mike Pence catching the COVID-19. Why is that bad? Because Mike Pence is the vice president, okay? And if he's the vice president, he is the right-hand man to President Trump, okay? So if President Trump catches it, it's because he's always around Mike Pence. If Mike Pence catches it, it's possibly because of his press secretary, okay? Now, if that is not the key, then it could be from Ivanka Trump. Ivanka Trump is President Donald Trump's daughter. Now, her personal assistant has it, okay? So many might say that Ivanka Trump's personal assistant is her right-hand man. That's the person that is always around her. So that could lead up to Ivanka catching it, which could give it on to her dad. Then, too, she could give it to her husband, her kids, so on and so forth. But we're not going to really dig deep into that story because we did it on the last segment. In this segment, we're going to talk about something that broke the internet. I saw it all last weekend, and it was the Erykah Badu versus Jill Scott on the Instagram battles. Me personally, I love it when women can get together and empower one another. What I love most is when women of color can get together and empower one another. Many times, as a woman of color, I've seen and witnessed women of color battling against one another. So it's kind of sad because we all want to see each other uplift one another, but it just seems as if not a lot of women uplift one another, especially if you're a woman of color. But what I loved about it is that they came together and they gave us magic. And not only did they uplift one another, they shown one another what their favorite song from the other person was. And not only that, but Jill Scott and Erykah Badu made history by being on there for 3 hours. Usually Instagram has like a cutoff time to where a certain person can stay on Instagram Live before they have to come back. No, they stayed on there for 3 hours, which is kind of unknown. Okay, that doesn't usually happen. And out of that as well, there was about 700,000 viewers. So usually what Instagram does is after a certain time, it'll either boot you off, or if you've reached the max number of viewers, they'll boot you off as well. But it seemed as if Instagram did not do that. And that amazed a lot of people. It amazed about 700,000 viewers, if you want to be exact. And that is something that Instagram didn't cut. Okay, they didn't cut their live stream when that many people came in, and neither Badu nor Scott seemed to have noticed. Erykah Badu actually quoted, "I don't have no conception of time. I don't know what that means." And that's something that Erykah Badu said to Jill Scott at one point. And you know what's so funny? The viewers didn't seem to complain either. What I love about this series is that it brings together different artists and it shows them uplifting one another. Again, you never really quite see that. You always see people versing against one another. You always see them, just battling against one another, competing against one another, not really liking one another because of that competitive edge. But what I like about these Instagram battles, the series that, these artists have decided to do, is that it brings people together through music. And that's really what brings people together in general. Music. When you're going to a family function, what do you play? Music. To get people relaxed, feeling good, cut the edge off. Music. what do you do when you're studying? If you're a music studier, to get your brain relaxed and steady, you listen to music. It may not be instrumental. It may be something to just soothe you. Music works in such it works in such a way that it just helps you feel good. And what I like about these Instagram battles is that it shows you people of color who have went such a long way in the music industry. And what I liked again about this series is that it shows women of color coming together and showing you that not everything is about competitive edge. I've mentioned this on this channel before, where a lot of fans like to pit people, especially women of color, against one another to kind of show that, people of color cannot work together. It's difficult to work with people of color, but in this case, it shows them in a positive light. It shows their work ethic, it shows their talent, it shows their love of music, and it shows their love of people. And it shows, that you can bring people together to give you the best entertainment of your life. And it also shows the next generation how they need to treat their fellow counterparts, even if they are competition, treating them nice and seeing how far you can go as a legend and in the next generation. And then that will transpire in the next generation and so far and so forth. So that's what I like about these Instagram battles. It brings people together. It brings that love of music back. And also, let's not forget this, it also brings sales up for these artists. Okay, so many times that song that you once loved or you can't remember, or maybe it's your first time hearing it, you're like, oh my goodness, I remember this song, or I like this song. And because you're doing that, either they're going to go back and listen to the song on YouTube, which is going to create views, which is going to create monetization, which is going to create money, or they're going to go to, they're going to go buy it on Apple Music, which is going to create money. Okay. Or they could go and buy the album, which again, that's going to create money. So it's good because it brings people together. Okay. It helps you not be bored at home, but at the same time, it hopefully revenues sales. So they're doing a very strategic thing here. And I love the hustle. I love the logic. And I think it's a great thing to do. So this segment is going to be kind of short, but I personally love what they have done. I believe in the works for this next Instagram battle is Nelly versus Ludacris. And that is honestly what I've looked forward to the Jill Scott versus Erykah Badu. I greatly enjoyed it. Okay. I personally really, really enjoyed it. I was very excited. I have a lot of their songs already. I actually have 2 albums from Erykah Badu, partially because she is from my hometown, but, I've always been a fan of Erykah Badu, and I've always been a fan of Jill Scott. Both of their albums were being played for me early in the morning on Saturday mornings when I had to get up and clean up, but it kind of transpired into my life as an adult to where I play their songs. It resonates with me as a person, and hopefully it resonates with my niece when she gets older, or maybe even my own kids, if or when I decide to have kids. So with that being said, that is the end of this segment.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Hey guys, so before that break, we were talking about Instagram battles, but most importantly, the impact and the influence that Erykah Badu and Jill Scott already have. But we wanted to go more in depth about the influence that they have done by doing this Instagram Live with one another. And we were also talking about how the next Instagram battle is going to be Nelly versus Ludacris, and how I am really excited for that. No, I'm not as excited as I was for the Erykah Badu versus Jill Scott, but back in the day, I knew every Nelly song, and I had to sneak and listen to Ludacris, but I was still doing it. So in this segment, I wanted to talk about 50 Cent talking about a new book. Now, if you don't know who 50 Cent is, he is Curtis Jackson. And he never really stopped his grind, even during quarantine. He is a grinder. He is the executive producer for Power, one of a very hit show. And he's also an artist. He's also he's a petty businessman, but he's a smart, petty businessman, okay? The Celebrity Gone TV executive sat down with celebrity chef and talk show host Rachel Ray about his upcoming film and TV ventures, as well as his new book, Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter. Jackson says it was nice being able to sit down and just write. He said, quote, "I spent so much time acting with the public in an entertainment format that they didn't see the vulnerability. They just see the 50 Cent presentation. When I get a chance to pull back on it, just being able to write it down and get it into the actual book is easier than presenting it to the public." End quote. He then goes on to express how he has a better understanding of success and the journey to it. To which he said, quote, "If you have a long enough career, you're going to have peaks and valleys in it. There's points when you look and the ratings are through the roof. There's points where it's flat. There's different things going on. And saying to yourself, there's no amount that you would look at and say, okay, I'm successful." End quote. He says at a certain point, the fame and the money no longer satisfied a successful person. To which he said, quote, "There's a point that you've brought everything. So you look and you go, I really don't want any of these things. So you start to be cautious of philanthropy and you want to give back to people and help as much as possible. But until you've reached that point, it shouldn't be a number amount. Because we all could exceed expectations. I never expected to make as much money as I made on my first record. And then after you've done that, everything opens up and you start looking at things a lot different." End quote. Ray also took time out of his interview to tell Fief how much he loves power. So what do I feel about the situation at hand? I'm really excited and happy for 50 Cent's or Curtis Jackson to have a book out. This hopefully shows people, what they need to do. There's different hustlers out there and how they hustle, but just giving them more incentive or giving them a closer look on how to hustle right, or things to look for, or how to treat yourself, or how he became who he is to this day. Because the Curtis Jackson who you guys know is not the same Curtis Jackson who I knew when he first went into the game. And seeing how he has changed from a guy who could rap really well, but he wasn't seen in the best light, to who he is now. Sometimes he says things that are off the wall, but he is really about his business and how he has technically changed his mindset to someone who is conscientious of how he spends his money, who he spends his money on, why he spends his money, and the things that he is passionate about. And you can kind of see that. Now, is it always in the best light? No, we're not going to talk about that. But you can tell he is passionate and he loves what he loves. So I'm really excited about this book, and I'm excited about the knowledge and different things that he puts into this book. And coming up after the break, speaking of money, we're going to talk about some of these fashion idols, these fashion big name products, and how they are in an ugly lawsuit battle. All of that coming up right after this break. Stay tuned.
Always on the go, but the day just won't be one without your Hollywood fix. Let Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast take care of that. Jordan and Keith is Entertainment Tonight meets Access Hollywood.
I'm Jordan. The guy laughing, that's Keith.
Yeah, I'm Keith.
An all-inclusive look of pop culture.
Welcome back, guys. So before that break, we were talking about Curtis 50 Cent Jackson, talking about his new shows as well as his new books, all on the Rachel Ray Show. And, his plans on just releasing a new book talking about hustling and how to hustle smart to help those who are trying to become better hustlers, better people to progress their profit, if you could say. And I also talked about how I loved how he transformed himself from someone who was just doing rap to getting in different realms of money and broadening himself as a businessman. Is he still petty? Yes. Is he a smarter and wealthier petty man? Yes. And I have to congratulate him and give him credit where credit is due. In this segment, I wanted to talk about some of the top fashion lines in an ugly lawsuit against one another. First, starting off with Steve Madden. It all happened in April, but it really transformed. It's really occurring now in May, or it didn't really take off and people weren't really talking about it until May. In April of 2020, Deckers Outdoor Corp versus Steve Madden took the court. The UGG's parent company, Deckers Company Corp., is suing Steve Madden for trade dress infringement, unfair competition, and design patent infringement in connection with its manufacture and sale of a fluffy sling-back slipper, one that Decker claims looks a bit too much like one that is UGG brand has sold and heavily promoted in recent years. In its newly filed complaint, Galata, California-based Deckers asserts that competitor Steve Madden has actively sold a look-alike pair of fuzz slippers in an effort to exploit Deckers' goodwill and the reputation of UGG's shoe, and that such bad faith and unlawful acts have misled and confused consumers and were intended to cause confusion or to cause mistake or to deceive as to the affliction, connection, or association of the alleged infringed footwear. We were intended to cause confusion or to cause mistake or to deceive to the affliction, connection, or association of the alleged infringing footwear with Deckers and the origin, sponsorship, or approval of the product by Deckers, with such elements of confusion and mistake being central to a claim of trademark or here trade dress infringement. But guys, this is not the first time that Steve Madden has actually gotten in trouble because of something like this. Back in January of 2016, Deckers versus Steve Madden, the UGG's parent company, Deckers Outdoor Corporation, filed a trademark and trade dress infringement suit against Steve Madden in the U.S. District Court in Los Angeles, alleging that Madden was making and selling copycat versions of UGG's Rockstar and Uptown sheepskin boots. The Madden shoes, according to Deckers, included reproductions of UGG's registered Sun Design logo and unique design elements on the uppers and soles of the boots. The parties settled the matter in April of 2006, and according to a release from Deckers, Steve Madden Ltd., quote, acknowledged infringement, agreed to pay a confidential amount in settlement, and agreed to an injunction prohibiting it from using the term UGG as a trademark or referring to Steve Madden Ltd. products and from using Deckers' registered Sun logo trademark as part of the settlement. Madden must also cease development, reproduction, manufacturing, advertising, promoting, selling, offering to sell, importing, or distributing any of the infringing products. But as we can tell, Steve Madden is still kind of doing it, because as of recently, what I've just told you guys is that this is something that keeps reoccurring. So it seems like if whoever is on the design team or whatever team it is that is in charge of making sure something like this doesn't happen again, it just seems as if they're not really paying attention. So we need people from the design team, whoever is designing these shoes, who's ever thinking of these ideas, to sit back and possibly ask their legal team if this has been a matter before, or, trying to have different people think out of the box, because it just seems as if people keep copycatting these other brands, which is in turn hurting them. Okay. I mean, for goodness sakes, this is something as early as April. Okay. We've also not mentioned, In January of 2019, we've had Lucky Horse Press versus Steve Madden. We've had Allison and Olivia versus Steve Madden. We've had Steve Madden versus YSL. We've had Steve Madden versus Cold Gaia. We've had Steve Madden versus Allbirds. We've had Valentino versus Steve Madden. Dr. Martens versus Steve Madden. We've had Stella McMartini versus Steve Madden. We've had Skechers versus Steve Madden. We've had Balenciagas versus Steve Madden. We've had Jeffrey Campbell versus Steve Madden. Balenciaga again versus Steve Madden. Alexander McQueen versus Steve Madden. And once again, we've had Deckers versus Steve Madden. So this is not their first time in court with Deckers, but it just seems as if they're just not quite learning their lesson. And you would think that something like this would possibly stop them from doing something like this, especially because this is something that is costing them about $1.8 billion in revenue. And then from there, it's about 1.7 billion the years prior, and so on and so forth. So to be honest with you, I haven't heard a lot of the lawsuits. That's what Steve Madden has told Fashionista back in 2014. It just seems as if, once again, maybe I understand that some things are selling quickly, especially because of fast fashion, of what is in the trend right now, of different things. But it just seems as if this is just a reoccurring thing. And although Steve Madden has said that this doesn't happen as frequently, it seems that if not every year, if every other year, they're getting hit with a dress infringement or with a trademark lawsuit, and that's costing them money. And if those lawsuits keep adding up, if the trademark infringement keeps adding up, if people keep hitting them with these different lawsuits every year or every other year, soon their brand is going to get shut down, okay, to where they will be sued indifferently, okay, meaning they will no longer be in business. Now, it's going to be hard to get Steve Madden out of business, one, because they're sold in stores that keeps it budget friendly for those who are more on a lower budget. However, it also gives you a higher budget for those who want, pricier things. So it meets people in the middle sometimes. But I just want Steve Madden to kind of look out, okay? And, just have people on the fashion team aware of what is going on. So, keeping that in mind and keeping a lookout and understanding. I understand this is in the trend, but maybe they need to change up things. If not a little more, a lot more, because something's just not working out. And I think they need to find out what is and what is not working out quickly before they get sued or get hit with a lawsuit again. All right. So with that being said, that is the end of our fashion lawsuit segment. Coming up in our next segment, we're going to talk about our legends that has recently passed away last week and how they have made an impact in our entertainment world. All of that coming up right after this break.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Before that break, we were talking about the different lawsuits that Steve Madden has been hit with and, ways that hopefully, they can stop being hit with either a trademark or an infringement or dress infringement case. And, I was also looking at the similarities between their version of a shoe versus the higher end version of a shoe, such as Alexander McQueen, YSL's, or Balenciaga's. And, having their team hopefully look into the fast fashions or the trends that are selling and trying to do a better job at trying to change up, that chosen style so that they're not getting hit every year, or if not every year, every other year with a lawsuit. And hopefully that will help them in the future. Right now, I wanted to pay homage to those that has recently passed away and, taking this time to tell you about their legacy. I said this in a podcast before, and I feel like, and I'm going to say it again, I feel like you should give flowers and you should give, homage to those people, those legends while they're alive. Telling them how important they are and, praising them and telling them how much they have impacted entertainment world. And I feel like many times they're not praised or shown how much they have impacted someone's career until they have passed on. And I feel like that's terrible because you want them to hear those words and feel that in their heart and soul while they're alive. Whereas if they've passed on, they can't really hear it. These people are legends, and I personally feel like they haven't gotten the recognition or the praise, those flowers, while they're alive. And I feel like that's terrible. But they all have made an impact as an artist or as a producer. Who I first wanted to start off with is Andre Harrell, and he was an executive who bridged hip hop and R&B, and he was just 59 when he passed away. He was an innovative music executive who was in the late 1980s founded Uptown Records, which was a crucial bridge between the worlds of hip hop and R&B, and who gave his first career break to Sean Combs, aka Diddy. And he became one of hip-hop's signature moguls and global ambassadors. His ex-wife, Wendy Credle, said the cause was from heart failure and that Mr. Harrell has had heart problems for a very long time. In the early to mid 1980s, hip hop was growing, and Mr. Harrell was at the center of the genre as a rapper and as an executive. But his vision for music wasn't always in the line with his peers. He preferred a slash of sophistication and an approach that would speak to older and younger generations alike, therefore opening up that bridge for people who are in older generations to like the music as well as younger people to like the music, and opening up that revenue so that that's going to generate more sales. People from older generations can listen to it, go and buy it, as well as the younger people from younger generations, they can go in and buy it as well. When he funded Uptown Records in 1986, he created a home for artists who were melded hip-hop swagger with traditional R&B smoothness, who had sleek surfaces and hard edges. For almost a decade, it was one of the most musically important and financially successful record labels in the country. Mr. Harrell helped build the careers of Mary J. Blige, Jodeci, I'll Be Sure, Guy, and many more. This man is a legend in the hip hop community, and his presence will be forever missed. People don't understand the impact that Little Richard has had on the music and genre, period. From rock and roll to R&B to smooth jazz, this man has played a role, and his flowers were never really given to him. People never really called out his name when people said, oh, he's an influence. This man influenced people that have influenced a total genre. He influenced Elvis. Okay. Many people don't like to say that, but Little Richard influenced Elvis to a complicit 1950s world. That's the time where many people of color were not brought into the same society as people know as it is today. Okay. There was a lot of segregation. People of color were looked down upon, and people of color who were trying to make it in the music industry was often shunned, overlooked, and sometimes their music was even taken away from them. What I'm trying to say here is that Little Richard kicked open the doors to rock and roll. With sight and through sound, he created an impact. He was the one who walked so people could run. He dealt with the hate about his race. He dealt with the hate about how he dressed, how he sounded, and he did it with thick skin. And he did it all so that people now could do what they are doing and dressing how they are doing and have a better impact now. And I feel like he didn't get the praise that he deserved. I would like to thank you for listening to the GSMC Social Media News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review, because that really helps us out. Also, be sure to follow us on all of our social media handles, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I would like to thank you, and I want you guys to have a good night, a good day, and everything in between. Once again, I am your host, Shamaria Jackson, and I'm signing out for today's social media news. Bye, guys.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Social Media Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.